What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy, Morgan Cannon. And we are here once again to talk about some of the latest Detroit Lions news because that's what we do over here at POD. This is the place where you can find all the latest news, updates, analysis, and so much more. It's a snowy day here in Michigan, but again, we're still going to talk some Lions. Morgan, the last time we got together, we had a really good discussion about the contract status of Myles Garrett, as well as we also recapped the Super Bowl. And since those two conversations, comment section's been full. There's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions when it comes down to this Lions roster, when it comes down to what Brad Holmes and company need to do when it comes to free agency. But one comment caught our attention, and that's kind of what, kind of sparked this video today, where we're going to take a look at another defensive end that could possibly be a target for the Lions. If you're talking about, if you're someone who's in the camp of like, hey, the Lions need to go out and trade for somebody, this is a player that I think by the end of this video, more fans should probably be talking about in terms of, again, being a realistic target for the Lions.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about it. Maxx Crosby, got some ties to Michigan, right?
Just a couple,
his
mom. It's not like he went to Eastern Michigan or anything like
that.
Or
True EMU, baby. Me and my brother went to Eastern. So, Max his mom was a lady from the East Side, actually. I don't know where he said that on some podcast or something, but I was like, that explains a lot, though, when you think about it. And I was like, okay. Yeah. I live on the East Side, for those that don't know, so I can joke about that. But, yeah, I think this is the Raiders. I can't remember what's come out. You guys can probably correct me in the comments. Miko, you might know. But, I know Max has kind of said, he's put some stuff out there, I'd like to win some football games at some point. I'm paraphrasing here, right? He said something along that line.
Yeah, he's definitely tiptoed around the fact that he wants to play meaningful football. He's never come out right and demanded a trade, and like Myles Garrett. But I think the assumption from the outside looking in is that hey, Max might not be happy, or he may not be interested in wasting, his prime years not being in contention, right, for a Super Bowl, right? I don't think the Raiders have been to the playoffs in Max tenure. Maybe they have once. So there's a lot that if you're a Maxx Crosby type of player where you're just listen, man, I'm one of the best edges in the league. This, that, and the third. I see guys getting moved. I see other guys, winning football games. And I think at some point in time, when you look at the history of the Raiders most recently, not their historic history, but just most recently, yeah, you can kind of get tired of just the mundane monotony of just losing all the time, or again, just not being able to even punch a ticket to get to the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And this is for, people are going to be in the comments, oh, y'all, this is some clickbait. Listen, man, it's February 12th. All right. We're already in the off season. It's snowy, out here in Detroit. So we just were then it was a good comment. And we want to encourage engagement in the comment section. So we appreciate it. Yeah. So Crosby, if y'all watched our Myles Garrett video and we talked at length about the situation the Browns put themselves in, right? And it's all self-done. All right. By Cleveland and the Haslam family. Okay. For the Watson deal and then kicking the can on Garrett, punting that can. So on the antithesis, the other end of the spectrum to that, is the Raiders, right? So yeah, we talked about the Raiders haven't really been competitive in Myles, since Myles, there's too many M's. And since Max has been there, right? So he was drafted in 2022, one of the rare, elite edge players in the NFL that wasn't taken in the top half of the first round. There's that curve is steep, man. When it comes to if you're taken early as an edge player, the odds of hitting on that player are just a lot higher, right? You have some exceptions to the rule like Max, Trey Hendrickson. There's a couple out there. But yeah, so the Raiders actually have 92 million, a little over 92 million in cap space as it stands now. So they're in a good spot. They have a top 6 draft pick. And, there's a world where they want to keep Maxx Crosby in the fold, right? So don't come at me, Raiders fans. We're not saying one way or the other. We're just talking about it. But if the Raiders did, Brady's there now, Miko. So there's some interesting hands in the pot now. It's no longer Mr. Bangs just running the show. It's, they got some football people in there now. So maybe they do want to move Maxx Crosby, hard reset, They have cap space, so they could really build a talented roster if they have the right person doing it.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're speculating here. So yeah, I just wanted to give it context before people are like, what are you guys doing? It's February 12th, man. All right. Soon we'll be talking about draft prospects, but we're just trying to have some fun.
Yeah. Honestly, if you're watching this video and like, what would make you guys talk about Maxx Crosby when Maxx Crosby hasn't even demanded a trade? Blame Matt. All right, Matt is the one that asked us to do this, so this is why we're talking about it, because I think it is interesting. Because Morgan, even if you go back to the middle of the season when the Lions lost Hutch, and it became that mad scramble of like, okay, who could the Lions get to replace Hutch's production? Maxx Crosby was like the first name that popped up in everybody's mouth. And it's been those ties. Like you talked about, how he's kind of danced around the fact of like whether or not he's happy in Vegas. He's also been dancing around the fact of like, hey, like his intrigue in playing for Dan Campbell, his intrigue in playing for the Lions right now. Hell, I think it was just last week where he was tweeting about, man, the Pistons look really good. Like his eyes are still back towards Detroit. So again, it's not the most far-fetched idea that like, hey, there could be some intrigue from his side to be like, hey, if I could get to Detroit, that'd be awesome. It really just becomes about the compensation. It becomes about the contract and those types of things. And that's the part of this video that we really want to talk about, because the difference between a Myles Garrett and a Maxx Crosby, Morgan, is it goes beyond just like the value of the contracts, right? Because if we look at both contracts, we talked about this with Myles Garrett, with all of the money that the Lions would be responsible for paying for, his cap hit is roughly around like 45 million, right? You're talking about a 2-year, $45 million deal to have Myles Garrett. We'll get into, again, the specifics of that because it's not clean cut of just like 2 years, 45 mil. When you look at Maxx Crosby, similar type of situation. We're talking about 2 years for about 43-ish million. So you're talking about a $2 million saving. On the surface, that doesn't look like all that big, right? Like who would really care? A lot of people would still say, I want Myles Garrett because he's the guy that's won a defensive player of the year. He's one of the guys that's like a guaranteed Hall of Famer, X, Y, and Z. The reason why I think a Maxx Crosby, though, Morgan, should be more appealing to Lions fans is the structure of those contracts. With Maxx Crosby, it is a very clean cut contract like you were talking about. We're talking about a guy that's owed about 23 million in 2025 and then about close to like 19 million in 2026. If you wanted to restructure Max's contract, again, if you wanted to trade for him and then restructure his contract to either A, lower that cap number just to lower it, you could do that, or you could still have the flexibility to restructure that contract and actually extend him so that he's with the Lions for the long haul and still spread that money out in a much more feasible way, so that again, you're not stuck paying 20 something mil in 2025 if you want to still have that flexible cap space that you currently have. Myles Garrett, we talked about this in the video, we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because, like we said, we did do a whole video on Myles Garrett. You can definitely go back and watch that. Myles Garrett is a similar situation. You would have to restructure his contract, but you're not restructuring it to keep him for the long haul. You're restructuring it to get all of that money that's in the voided years as close to like upfront that as you can, so that you're not paying him to not be on this roster. Like
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. So to paraphrase the video, guys, like what Miko said, the Browns put 5 voided years at the end of all the reshuffling they did when they converted all of his base salaries into prorated signing bonuses. And the reason we're so emphatic on this channel and on the website, if you read anybody's stuff, if a Garrett deal were to happen, the team acquiring him would almost certainly have to restructure so they're not paying anywhere from 20 to 30 million for him not to be on their roster in 2027, because all that voided money becomes due once the contract expires. So yeah, perfect segue, Miko. And to his point, to Miko's point, Crosby's is very clean. They added 3 voided years on the end of his contract just for like structural purposes, but there's no money attached to them. So like Miko said, if the Lions or whoever did acquire Maxx Crosby, if there's another fan of other teams watching this, you could lower that number and just spread that out if you wanted to. And then you could fold that voided money into a new deal if you were to re-sign him. So this is where teams talk about cap gymnastics. This is what they're talking about. But to Miko's point, from a draft compensation standpoint, I don't think the Raiders will be asking for nearly as much for a player like Crosby as the Browns will be asking for Garrett. And we want to make the distinction. Love Maxx Crosby, all pro type player. Myles Garrett's it'd be like acquiring Reggie White. We talked about that before. I know that probably outs us as being old heads, excuse me, but it
YouTube it.
would be. Yeah, look up if you're young, Google Reggie White Packers, okay? Because the man was beating the crap out of people. And that's the type of player Garrett is. He's going to be a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer, go down as one of the greatest to ever do it. In my opinion, became the best defensive player in football the moment Aaron Donald stepped away. So want to give that credit to that man. But yeah, I do think from the type of player they are and the situation they're in, and then the contract also plays a big point where the Raiders have done things right. Like if they can get a quarterback and get someone who can evaluate some talent as a GM, they could be in a good spot because right now their books are pretty clean, man. Right, Miko?
Yeah, relatively clean. Not a lot of, again, big contracts on the Raiders side. And like you said, when it comes down to like draft compensation, they're in a situation where, like, yeah, they would want a first round pick for Maxx Crosby. No one's saying that they're giving him away for anything less than that. But again, I've seen a few people bring up the Philadelphia Eagles when talking about how aggressive they were to acquire talent. I think you look back at what the Eagles had to give up for someone like AJ Brown, and I think that's a similar type of deal that you could probably offer to the Raiders and probably get Maxx Crosby when you're talking about a first round pick and a third within the same draft, right? So you're talking about giving up your first and third for that year to get a 4-time Pro Bowler in Maxx Crosby. Maybe you have to give up a future pick in terms of maybe a future third, maybe a future second if you really want to like guarantee the odds of locking up that deal. But again, you get a guy that's clearly under contract for the next 2 years. You have the flexibility to extend him long term. Someone like Maxx Crosby to me just makes more sense. And like we said in the last video, Myles Garrett, you're talking about multiple firsts in the next 2 years, right? Because of just the cap hell that Cleveland is in, and they need as many draft picks as they possibly can. Vegas, in theory, Morgan, could be fine with taking a first, again, just getting an additional first round pick that they could then lobby to help them move up the draft because they're currently slotted at 6. If they want to improve their odds of getting a Cam Ward or improving their odds of getting a Shedeur Sanders, now they have 2 first round draft picks to basically offer to any team. And one of those picks is still in the top 10. So, like I said, like you were saying, the salary cap gymnastics are a lot easier with Maxx Crosby. I also think the draft compensation is much easier when you talk about a Maxx Crosby type player. Like you said, to keep this from being, again, for anybody trying to categorize this clickbait, we're not saying that this should happen or will happen. But if we are talking about, if we want to entertain the conversation that like, hey, the Lions need to be aggressive and make a move for an impact player, specifically on the defensive line, this is where I think eyes need to start to shift if you're specifically in the camp that they need to trade. And I think if you look in this direction, you'll see that the route to getting a player like this is at least cleaner than it is when you talk about a Myles Garrett.
Yeah, and like we're not trying to trivialize like giving up your first and the third. Like if a trade like this happened, right? That's still steep, man. You're that's you're only picking one time, and you're on in day 1 and 2. So that'd
Right.
be a steep price for Brad Holmes to pay. But if you're the Raiders, right? We already talked about their $92 million, under the cap, so they're in good space. And if they were to trade a Maxx Crosby, if you guys can look at this at Over the Cap if this helps you guys understand, but there's a prorated signing bonus due for Crosby in 25 and 26. It's a little over $5 million, right? So if we talked about pre-June 1 and post-June 1 designations. If you guys want to make that really simple and clean, just to understand it, pre-June 1, all of that money, the prorated bonuses, the money he's due no matter what, that comes due once the contract expires. So pre-June 1, you're going to designate that. All that's going to count towards that $10 million is going to count towards your 2025 cap, excuse me. If it's a post-June 1 designation, you can spread it out, that number, defer it over the course of 2 years. So then it's just a little over 5 and 5. So that makes it really easy. It's a clean number for those that are trying to learn more about the salary cap. And so it's not bad for the Raiders. And you get, like Miko said, a little bit of extra, some more ammo if you do want to move up, or say you want to sit a year, like you might stink again, but you're waiting for a quarterback prospect you like. I don't know anything about the 2026 class. So
no one
But yeah,
does until that draft class comes up. Like
exactly.
let's just be fair. No one knows
Yeah.
about the next draft class till the next draft class is up. But
Unless you're like
it
really tapped in. Like I know a few
true.
people that, yeah, but like, yeah, those people are few and far between.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
But essentially, like it's easy and clean for the Raiders. It's simple, I think, relatively for the Lions if they wanted to get into that market. Because again, even with trading for Maxx Crosby, like you're talking about the Raiders having 90, over $90 million in cap space available. The Lions have close to 50. And like I said, you would have to restructure Max's contract to keep that level of comfort. But the Lions then could, yes, you're giving up draft capital where Brad has, for the most part, succeeded, especially on day one and day two. But you would basically be shifting strategies a bit. And that was something that we also talked about in our last videos. Like maybe they do need to shift strategies a bit where we're not saying get rid of all your draft capital, but again, get a young quality player at a premium position and then utilize what's available in free agency, which is something that I think we'll dive into over the next couple of weeks because you start looking at free agency, not just at the top of free agency, but really going into the free agency class, you can find some gems that could be had for reasonable cost.
Yeah, there's some players like Josh Sweat. I don't know if these players are going to hit the market, but they're free agents as of now, like a Josh Sweat, Khalil Mack. There's another one, Miko. Who was it? I can't remember.
We talked about Chase Young again,
Yeah, who's
younger
productive in
guy.
New Orleans. Yep,
Right.
still
Younger
20.
guy still has a lot to really possibly give a team, or at least again, even as a depth piece. So we say all that to say it's not an end all be all. We said this when we talked about Myles Garrett. We're not saying that the Lions need to go out and get Myles Garrett. We're also saying the same thing about Maxx Crosby. I'm not saying that the Lions need to go out and get Maxx Crosby. I think we can both agree, though, if the Lions were to go in this route, the route to the Vegas Raiders just seems easier. And it seems like it'd be more affordable. It seems like it would be better for the Lions in both the short and the long term. So if I had to cast a vote, Morgan, that's the vote that I would be casting. And I think it'll also just be a perfect story, right? Another homegrown type of player comes back home, gets to play for a team that he seems to be very passionate and very interested in. And I'm gonna just say right now, I can't remember the last time I saw two white edge rushers.
Yo,
I
you
can't
took
remember.
that.
I can't remember the last time I saw it, and I'd love to see it.
You took that thought right out of my head. I was like, yo, I'm about to make the best point because there hasn't been. I'm a football encyclopedia. There has not been like two all pro level white defensive ends on the same team. That has not happened because I would remember it because it would be an anomaly. Yeah. So if we're looking at what it would cost the Lions against the cap as it stands now, we talked about the voided years and the flexibility there. There are 3 at the end of that deal that would expire in 2026, but his cap hit would be 22-ish, 22 million in 2025 and about 19 million in 2026. So that's what you'd be looking at right now for Crosby. Another one you could throw out there is maybe a Trey Hendrickson, a rare white defensive end that's a dog.
Yep.
Not the same. He was the leading sack getter in 2024, I want to say. So had a heck of a year, more of a technician, really good player, but not like the game wrecker that Crosby is, and especially not Myles Garrett. So yeah, there's some talent out there. Like we talked about, we'll dive into the free agent class as we get closer to March. So it's going to come quick, man. March 10th is the date you want to keep in mind for when you can. It's the legal tampering period where you can there can be communication, and then those deals get can become fully executed on the new league year, March 12th, a month from today as we're recording this.
I was gonna say like a little under a month away from that. So I mean, again, it's something to kind of keep your eyes on. So that's pretty much gonna do it for this video, guys. Like Morgan said at the top of this video, definitely keep adding comments to the comment section. We like to read the comments. We like to know what you guys are thinking. And if you guys have questions about specific players, it's something that's again a really good exercise to dive into that because it's so easy, I think, to throw out a name and say, hey, the Lions need to go get this player and not really understand the ramifications of what that draft capital is going to look like or what that contract looks like and how that's going to play a part in what the Lions currently have going on. So, like I said, definitely keep feeding us your comments in the comment section. If you were looking for more additional Lions content, you can always check out prideofdetroit.com. There are new articles being written over there all the time. Literally every single day, there's something new being posted over there. And if you want to stay locked in on our video content, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That's going to make it easy for you to be notified when we upload new videos, when we decide to go live, and just in general, it kind of helps out the channel as a whole. So once again, thank you guys for your support, and that's going to do it for this video. I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch. and we'll catch you guys in the next one.